Something I did not know about you, I know this comes up a lot in your biography, but I think is a very fun fact, is that you roomed with Dr. J in college.
Yes.
What's a lesson you learned from him then that you still think about now?
Uh, mm, He's the nicest person you ever want to meet. I've been saying that for years when I told people before he became famous, when he's just my roommate, and I was bragging on how good he was. I said, as good as he is as a basketball player, he's a much better person.
Something we talk about a lot in this podcast, like trying to balance who you are when you're performing and who you are off the court, and how to sort of like reconcile those different identities. And ruthless elite level competition, they don't necessarily select for like virtuous traits, right? You're going to have a better sense of if this is true or not than I would, but the public perception of someone like Kobe or like MJ is that they're like a relentless killer. A lot of what you talk about in your books is that actually can get in the way of winning sometimes, right?
It really comes down to being in the moment and being sensitive and being able to understand that you perform and you compete. A lot of those guys, just like we'll take Will Chamberlain and Bill Russell. You know, they used to go at each other and real hard. But in the off season, especially back in the days when blacks couldn't stay in just any hotel, people don't want to talk about that, but they used to stay at each other's homes and whatnot, and they were really, really, really close. So a lot of these athletes, they're good friends off the court. Some of them have probably, for the most part, they're people. They're still people. They're very sensitive. You can mean what you say without being mean when you say it. You can still have, you don't lose your humanity, and that's one of the big things about when I work with people is to make sure that they don't forget the humanity, the virtue of, you know, being kind, being firm, but you could still have compassion. You can be tenacious, but still not to the point where you're not sensitive to the other person.
How do you think about integration amongst someone's different parts? Is there a switch that you coach folks to turn on to kind of vacillate between the kindness, the compassion, the ability to joke around off the court, to deeply respect someone, while at the same time bringing out that fierce competitor when they're on the court?
Yeah. Well, it's a difference between, see, it's interesting because, a lot of my training, a lot of my philosophy comes from Zen and martial arts. Bruce Lee talked about be like water. You have to be this idea of calmness. And in the Zen tradition, they call it mushin, or no mind. So there's not a really personality there. It's just a presence, a mind that just see things. And so the people who are the most calm are the ones that are most efficient and deadly, because they're not caught in their emotions. When you're coming from fear, or you're coming from lack, or you're coming from overly aggressive, then you're focused on how you're doing, and you're not focused on what you're doing. And you see it when people are in the zone. There's no self-consciousness there. You're just being, you're allowing, you're just flowing with things as they are. Be like water. You got to go in there and you got to, we call it outcome expectation. You expect to do well. You expect to be able to do it. And even though you don't know what's going to happen, you just show up and just say, if I'm in the moment, if I'm in the eye of the hurricane and I'm coming out of that silence, that stillness, that still point, everything's going to be fine. It's going to be what it's going to be, because I can't control the outcome. But if I control the moment, the outcome is going to be okay. This is stuff that most people don't really understand, because they think that you have to be mean or you have to be a certain way. And the most important thing about it is you got to be authentic. You got to be real. You got to be who you are. You can't be somebody else. But that's where you got to know who you are and know how you need to prepare. But once the ball drops, or once the game starts, you got to be there, and you got to bracket everything. Only thing that matters is now. And if you manage the moment, everything else is the same. Now, we say that about the game, but it's the same about life. And so if I have that habit of doing that all the time, if that's my way of being, it's like this thing about the master of life. You never know if he's pursuing excellence and wisdom in what he's doing, whether he's working, living, or playing. to him, he's always pursuing excellence.
The idea of managing the moment. If someone's listening to this and they're like, I need to be better at managing the moment, what's like one technique or tool you'd give them to do that?
The main thing is be where your body is. Like right now, you're sitting and you're listening to this. Hopefully, you're not driving. If you're driving, then be aware, whatever. But let's just say, like us, we're sitting here. How do you train yourself to just be here and to bracket off, or to be able to bracket, other things and just be here? Just let everything, just be fully engaged in the act of listening. But it takes effort to do that. Volitional effort is the effort of attention. So direct attention and the sustained attention and to be able to not get distracted, that's a practice that you can do, not just when you're sitting and being quiet, but even now as you're listening to me. How do you anchor yourself in a moment where you're just listening and allowing what's being said to be heard without interpreting it or anticipating what's the next question or how I might answer, but to be fully open to what's being said now?
When you walk into a room that has Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen, Bill Winnington, Ron Harper, all in one room, is it hard to get them to buy into this idea? Because it's a great idea. I think it's one of these things that's like I love these ideas. I have a long time meditation practice. I'm very interested in them. I sometimes have a hard time bridging like theory to doing, right? Did you have to work to get them to buy into this?
I went there to serve. I knew I could be of service, and being an athlete and being around elite performers, it was more about how can I help them just be in the moment, and how can I talk to them about being in the zone of flow that would get their attention. And so if I can talk to them about how you can have that more often than not, because it's a paradox, because the more you try to be in the zone of flow, the harder it is to get in there. But being mindful, some of the things I'm offering will make you flow ready. Stephen Kotler, he talks about flow triggers. And so a flow trigger is curiosity, is passion, is purpose. A flow trigger is unpredictability, novelty, complexity. And so when I talk to them about understanding the flow triggers, so what I'm teaching them is to be in a moment, see things in new and fresh ways, and the unpredictability of it isn't something to be concerned about and worried about. It's something to be embraced, and to realize that if you do all your training, and then if you're in the moment and you see clearly, then you will know what you need to do. When you talk about being in flow, it's like it's happening effortlessly, but there's a lot of work that goes into that. So it's so simple, but it's not easy. Because we have this condition that we want to know how things are going to turn out before they turn out.
Yeah, there's this concept in psychology called an ironic effect. And it's basically just that. It says that the harder you try not to try, the less likely you are to get into that flow zone. So that's the whole paradox. Like if you try to get to this place and you effortfully try, you can't. But you need to do a whole lot of effortful work beforehand, so that you have the tools that then allow you to get to that place. Even individuals that are excellent and that have been on this path of mastery, they still will experience chatter in their mind, in doubt. When you are working with someone and they have that, do you coach them back to their body, to a physical anchor, to lose themselves in the game itself? I'm curious what happens if you've got someone, they've done the prep work, they're there, but then that voice in their mind says, what if? How do you coach that voice?
Yes. So I was working with the Lakers, and they were playing the Celtics in the championship. It's a Sunday game, and I'm going in to work with the guys. They're going to, they have their film session. We eat, and then that film session, and then we do a little thing, and I'm going in there, and the voice inside of my head was saying, they don't want to hear from you. You got nothing to say. And so it was some trauma got triggered. I don't know what it was, but it was like, okay, like I'm seeing that. I call it the negative committee, and that inner talk, I just notice it as, it's just talk. It's like it could be background chat or whatever. And I just noticed it, allowed it to be there, then try to get rid of it. And then I had time for that. I got something to do. Let's focus on the next thing. And then I just direct my attention to just being able to just go in and make the next play. That's what I teach for people all the time. I don't care where you are, what you're into, things are going to happen, things are going to come up. But you got to remember, what are you doing? What's the moment? Don't forget the moment. Don't forget what the intention is. And so my intention is to be here, and there's a notice, I don't really have time for that. That's a negative. I'm not trying to hear that. Then I switched that, like, come on, man, let's just make the next play. It's gonna be great. And so that caught me off guard because I didn't expect that. I've been doing this for a long time. But it's always about the unpredictability of things and the idea of knowing that you can create space, even if it's this much space between stimulus and response. So when that happens, you can pause and just ask, okay, what's my intention? Why am I here? What's important now to win? And just focus on being in the body, just breathe in. And okay, that's what I said. The body and the breath can be an anchor. Just come back, breathe in, breathe out. I'm here, reset, reboot, renew, then make the next play. Do what you know to do, and the next step will be given to you. There's a movie called A Predator. And in the movie, Jesse Ventura is, he got this big machine gun and he's, they're shooting aliens and whatnot. And the little dude said, hey, man, you're bleeding. And Jesse said, man, I ain't got time to bleed. That's it. It's that kind of thing. It's like, it doesn't matter what it is. Can you bracket it? You can set it aside? See, because we have this ability to step back and observe ourselves. And the idea is to observe ourselves uncritically. Our reactions are like, just to observe it without judging, without identifying with it or trying to move it away. Just let it be there. And then it's like background music. Just put it there and just focus on what's the next play? Just begin again. Just step back. And that's a practice I've been doing for a long time. So it's a way of being for me. And my role as a teacher helps me also because, like Jesse, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. It's a muscle to develop. And just every opportunity is a rep. And it really is. Earlier, you said, simple, something we always say is like simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. It really is. Just acknowledge what's happening, be aware of it non-judgmentally, come back to your values in the moment, and then do the next right thing. And just over and over and over again. And I think the more you do that, the better you get at being able to have those intrusive thoughts or have those intrusive feelings or the doubt or the negative self-talk. And that stuff never goes away. You just don't freak out about it. And you just have a much quicker time responding and coming back to your values in the moment and then just acting in alignment with those values.
And that's where your confidence comes from. Where you were like, I heard somebody say this, you can't stop the birds of worry from flying into your hair, although I don't have it, but but you can stop them from building a nest. So your intrusive thoughts are always gonna come, or it can come, but it's not the thoughts, it's whether you have, if you occur to yourself, or you believe that you have the ability to pause and choose to respond to it rather than react to it. I responded to it rather than reacting to it. Reacting, trying to get rid of it and saying, oh, it's going to be bad. I'm not ready. And, why is this happening now? I don't have time for that. That's too much noise and clutter. Is to be able to just bracket it, just set it aside like background music and just focus on the next thing. And then when you do that, then it gets to a point where it just flows. It's just like, it's effortless because all you have to do is get out of the way and allow it to happen. And that's the biggest thing, to form the intention and then to be relaxed and allow it to happen as it needs to happen.
You started your career, George, working with incarcerated people. Is that right?
I started my career as a financial analyst.
Oh, sorry. I meant your teaching, your mindfulness teaching career.
Yeah.
Yes.
What happened was when I left the corporate world and I started teaching full time, I was living in a meditation center. And even before that, when I was in corporate, I was doing, learning this stuff about 41 years ago. In the meditation center that I was a member, they used to get requests from everybody, from schools, from banks, from Harvard, medical school, law school, whatever. And I would go in and voluntarily teach them mindfulness. I did it in a way where I changed the language so it was accessible and available for them. And I didn't expect them to do what you would do if you went to a meditation center or nothing. But it was my job to go and meet people where they were and to figure out how to communicate the core, the principles of the teachings, the essence of the teachings in a way where they could hear it.
That was gonna be my question, is like, working with the 93 Bulls on the stress of success is very different from working with incarcerated populations, right? So I'm curious how that resonated and how the method maybe changes for that group.
Yes. Well, once again, when I put in the work, it's funny, like we talk about being in the zone for flow, and we talk about some of the triggers like novelty, complexity, and and unpredictability, which people wouldn't think would be a flow trigger. It is. And I went in, I was working with this group, and there were 32 inmates, and I had copious notes on how I was going to present it to them and whatnot. I go in there were 32 inmates, and 28 of them were Spanish speaking only. So I had to use an interpreter. So all those notes, all of that stuff I had to throw away. I just go to the basic fundamentals. And then when you get in there, you got to know, well, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to communicate to them. So I basically had a message, be the message, and say, okay, when stuff happens, you still have to be able to pause and figure out how you're going to do what you say you're going to do, or the task that's going in there. And so for me, it's the same drill as, can I be authentically who I am, and can I meet people where they are? What's my intention? The clarity of what I'm doing. I'm going in there to help them deal with me being a substance abuser, also learning how to use this ability of being in the moment, mindfulness, or whatever you want to call it, a process of being able to say yes to life. And then in that space between stimulus and response, even if it's only like like paper thin, it'd be paper thin, there's still some space where we have, autonomy. We get to choose what we focus on, what we think, how we feel about things. If we don't like how we feel, how what we're thinking, we can change it. But we have to have that ability to be in the eye of the hurricane, and to have the idea that we make choices. So then we get to a place where we have self-efficacy, and we know it doesn't matter what happens. Not that it doesn't matter, but whatever happens, we get to choose how we're going to respond to it. We get to choose whether we're going to withdraw energy or bring more energy to seek to understand what's happening.
Can we drill that into that for a second? I mean, I know it's like, we're just going to it's probably better if we can practice rather than just talking about it. But like the experience of pain, how do you coach someone through responding in that moment, changing the channel, and being self-efficacious in a moment like that where it feels overwhelming, perhaps?
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that, because for the last month I've been dealing with shingles, and it's got in my trigeminal nervous system. So I have nerve pain, and I've had to take meds and whatnot. So the last month I've been sitting, just breathing in, breathing out, and knowing it, and tolerate, being uncomfortable. This idea of getting through the ideas about it and just experiencing it as a bare sensation and on a bare level. Because what would happen is, before I learned this, I said, okay, I used to get migraines. That was one of the ways it would manifest. And I said, I was in pain all day yesterday. Well, it's not really true. There were moments of where the pain is always moving up and down, but I was in my head about it and relating to it as a memory instead of relating to it in present time experience. And so to be able to just one breath at a time, just be here, this idea of just being able to notice it and not even calling it pain, just noticing it. It hasn't gone away for months. Who knows? It might go away, it may not. But the idea is, you just make space for it. Say, yeah, it's there, but it's not who I am. It's what I'm experiencing. And I could just see it and then direct my attention to making the next play, to doing the next thing. But so it's this idea of, how do you observe it without being critical or without judging? Now, when we judge and we're critical, now that is, you can see how that creates identification with it, without just allowing it to just be there and say, okay, right now, I'm breathing in, breathing out, I'm feeling it, and it gets the crescendo, but then it goes down. Then there's times when I don't feel it at all, when I forget about it and I focus on something else. But you can see how you cause suffering. There's suffering, and then there's suffering on top of the suffering because of the reactivity to it. And this idea of Viktor Frankl, he was in the concentration camps. He says, when we find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering, but we change our relationship to it. So it's like, okay, this is happening, and I'm curious about it. What is it? What is it like? And so now I can really talk about dealing with pain in real time. This is interesting. It's one thing to say, okay, so for the last month, I've just been breathing in, breathing out, and just making space for the pain. And sometimes after you pain meds, sometimes I get frustrated or whatever. But if I can just observe it in a way where it actually gets me more present and having more of an ability, more compassion for people who are suffering.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think it's also worth teasing out for listeners that sometimes the skillful thing to do is take medication or turn on a funny movie or do something to distract yourself from the pain, so long as you're doing that mindfully, so long as you're making a choice to do that. and not just get carried along. I think also I'm curious, George, how you think about this. And I'm painting in broad strokes here, but it seems like 20 years ago, maybe not even 20 years ago, the pendulum was very much in the direction of repress your feelings, don't talk about them, stuff it all away, particularly in a performance world. And now over the last couple of years, it's the pendulum swung pretty hard in the opposite direction toward, let's talk about our feelings all day. Let's really like feel our feelings. And sometimes you can almost get stuck in your trauma or in your pain, whether it's physical or psychological or in your fear. And something that we try to communicate a lot on this podcast is like there is a middle way, which is having compassion towards yourself and acknowledging what you're feeling and not pushing it away and being with it. But at the same time, sometimes it's not skillful to dwell on it, and you just have to move on and keep showing up in alignment with those values. How do you think about that? And how have you, as someone that's been at the expert level of this practice for so long, how have you seen that pendulum shift?
Yeah, so I have a lot of experience in 12-step recovery. And one of the things that I learned early on was this idea of share your experience, strength, and hope. So you talk about the thing, so you talk about it, then what you gonna do? Are you gonna get down? What you gonna do? Cool in the game. Get up off the wall, dance, come on. Something like that. You gotta get up and get down, right? So it's about this idea of personal responsibility. How are you gonna respond to it? So the Buddha talked about the middle way. Yes, and it's like improv. Yes, and so the thing is, so you have to be able to identify the problem without identifying the problem without being identified with it. So if you know you're going too much, or you're talking too much, or you're not doing anything, that's why we talk about you share your experience, but then you'll strengthen your hope. So you acknowledge it, and then say, well, how are you going to relate to it? And here's what I wanted to talk about. So I like to bring some science in. So something happens and we interpret what it means. That's choice. Okay. So 90% of our long-term happiness is predicated on how the brain and the nervous system interprets experience. Not 10%, 90%. So I could look at this and say, I got the shingles, it's not contagious now because the blisters are gone, but it's in my nervous system. And, it's like, okay, so you just deal with it and say, okay, am I going to let that affect me? Or am I going to just say, okay, that's what's happening, but how I relate to it is important. So it's not affecting my spirit at all. My spirit is cool. My mindset is cool. So I talk about the 4 A's all the time. And the 4 A's are the awareness, or the mirror mind of something. It's just seeing it. It is what it is. And then the acceptance of it, that's where it gets challenging. Because one thing to see it, and sometimes we can't see it because we don't accept it. So they're intertwined. But once I accept it and say, yes, okay, I got this pain, or not even call it pain, I got these sensations that are uncomfortable. So I'm getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And so the awareness, the acceptance of it, and then the compassionate action, which is what you talked about. You do what you can for it. You take pain with pills when you can, but then the compassionate action, then the assessment, then to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, and to reflect on why did this happen. Okay, maybe it's just maybe it's me being able to relate to it in a way, and my practice is getting deeper. No struggle, no swag, no pressure, no diamonds. It's just like, okay, so now when I teach this, I'm coming more from my existential point. Because when I was first having this chronic pain, that was 40 years ago, and then a little bit in between, but 40 years ago when it was really intense. And so now here I am again, kind of dealing with it. So the awareness, the acceptance, the compassionate action, then the assessment, what worked, what didn't work, what do I need to learn and practice so that I can even be more accepting and more able to experience the pain, to still experience the discomfort, but still be able to live a life where I'm present for it. And that's where right effort comes in, because sometimes people try too hard or they don't try hard enough. You got to find that balance. It's like if you play guitar, that string has to be just right. So but it gets out of tune, then you tune it back. It's just that simple for a lot of people. For myself, when I was experiencing the powerlessness, is because I'm thinking that out there is that I don't have any control, but I do have control. I always have control over my choice. I always have control whether I'm going to respond or react to it. So when things happen, it's an opportunity. Instead of making a mistake, that's an opportunity. It's not a reflection on me not being worthy or whatever. So you see what I'm saying? So you relate to the world. Okay. So growth mindset, what's the lesson here? And when I learned this, I can share my experience, strength, and hope. So now I can share it in a way where people say, wow, well, George did that. Maybe I can do that. That's very different. So I wanted to read you something that's from a book, Neville God, and he says it's called Renunciation, and maybe this will help. It says, renunciation, resist not evil. There's a great difference between resisting evil and renouncing it. When you resist evil, you give it attention. You continue to make it real. When you renounce evil, you take your attention from it and give your attention to what you want. So the reality is, we're some bad motherfuckers. We got a masterpiece or, Buddha nature, Christ consciousness, whatever we hold in mind manifests. So whatever you are not what you think you are, but what you think you are.
I have a question for you, George, that I'm hearing all this. I agree, right? You're preaching to the choir here. I think someone might push back and say there are times in life when trying to force a silver lining on pain just gets in the way. And I'm thinking of grief in particular. So you lose a child, you lose a loved one. And, the worst thing to say to someone that's in the midst of grief is, well, why don't you have a growth mindset about this? What are you going to get out of it? So how do you think about the limits of this?
Well, I would never tell anybody that.
Right. No, I'm not implying you would. Of course
but
not. I'm
just
just saying
saying,
in
but
general.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about, you got to accept it. So the acceptance is you go through grief. You go through boggling, denial, anger, depression, acceptance. So the thing is, and people will say that to me, well, I'm not going to just say, everything's great. I'm not saying that. Basically, what I'm saying is, do it whatever way you're doing it and see if it works. If it's working for you. If it's not working for you, you might decide to do something different. You know what I'm saying? So I'm saying, people say, well, you're forcing me. Well, you ain't accepted it. That's why I feel like force. Once you accept it, it ain't going to be force. Because forcing, when you have force, you're going to keep doing force. But the power is when you can let go and just go with it. And then you can see that it's a very different experience. So anytime somebody says, well, you're forcing me, if you feel like you're being forced, then you got to look inside, because it's how you're interpreting it or how you're relating to it is the issue, not the issue itself. And so that's why, one of the things Noah said was, leave the mirror alone and change your face. So you got a frown, you don't like it, change it. It's on you. Then people say, well, George, you're saying it's my fault. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm saying you are reacting and responding. That's a choice. And when you see yourself reacting, that's telling you how you are being. That's telling you, okay, so if I'm reacting that way, I'm not accepting what's happening. And it's fine not to accept it, but how's that working for you? Suffering is always there, but there's a way of relating to it where you can find peace in the suffering. You can understand that there's a I talk about it all the time. I have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And when you get comfortable being uncomfortable, then it's no longer so uncomfortable.
Can we talk about ego for a sec?
Yes.
So you strike me as someone who is just wise as can be, and also extremely humble and approachable and accessible and lighthearted. And it's a similar presence with someone like a Joseph Goldstein or a John Kabat-Zinn. And you've worked with the best of the best. You've been in the locker room with Kobe, MJ. You have every right to have a big ego. You've been around the block. You've been doing this for a long time. What keeps you playful, like in your own practice?
It's interesting because I read somewhere, I don't know exactly where I read it. I want to think it was Buttersworth, get his name, but he says something about he was a minister. Actually, I think he was Maya Angelou's minister, but I read somewhere where it said, we are not fixed points. We are ever-changing events. So we're always in the becoming. We're always evolving, right? And so even if I have an ego, even if I describe who I am, descriptive language, that's in the past. So generative language is like becoming, like doing, being, loving, being peaceful, or being peace, being clarity. I grew up Southern Baptist, so the Sunday school keeps coming whenever. But I had another one. There's no this illusion of separateness. When we talk about Buddhism, we talk about this idea. People get suffering, they get impermanence, but this idea of no self, people don't get that one. That one seems a little bit weird. But I refer to it as an illusion of separateness. So every once in a while, we get beyond the illusion of separateness. Like me living here in Boston, I remember in 2013, I think it was when they had marathon bombing, there were people running towards the explosion, not away from it. 9/11, people were running in to the towers, not running away. Every once in a while, we forget that we're a man, we're Democrat, Republican, black, white, male, female, Christian, Muslim, or whatever. We get beyond that illusion of separateness and realize I and the other are one. And so for me, it's like, and I have a couple of Georgisms. One of my Georgisms is I forget myself in service to find myself. So for me, it's like my job is to help everybody, be who they are, help people find themselves. So it's just this curiosity and just, being a learner, man. That's what it is. I appreciate you saying that. And it's interesting because being humble is another way of saying don't know mind, which is a Zen koan, don't know mind, a beginner's mind. You can teach a beginner anything, an expert, you can't teach anything. And so for me, a day at a time, anything's possible.
I have one more question for you if you have some time. I don't want to.
Yes, man. Go for it, man. We're in the flow. Let's do it.
Well, I was just going to ask you how you thought about success, and because what you're talking about is beautiful, right? Like allow to coach people to be more themselves. In the context of sports, success and failure is so objective, right? It's like who wins, how much do you score, blah blah. In that context, how did you think about success and failure? And like, I think people probably look at your career and like, wow, he really helped the Bulls win the championships, or he helped the Lakers win the championships. Those are his successes, but you may not think about it like that, right? So how did you think about success and failure, and how did you coach people?
Yeah, so I'm going to drop some stuff on you. There's a book called The Strangest Secret written by Earl Nightingale. And you know what the strangest secret is? We become what we think about. Okay? As a man thinking in his heart, so is he. So this idea in the book, he has a definition for success that I love because I'm a recovering perfectionist. Okay? So his definition is success is a progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So when I talk to people, I'm not competing against anybody out there. I'm competing against my previous best self. Then all I need to do is get a little bit better today, a little bit better, 1%, 1%, and keep doing it that way. So you can only control you. So your job is to just get better. Just do what you know to do, and don't focus on the outcome. Focus on the moment and focus on your goal. Focus on the process that's going to get you there. So to me, it's this idea of success is just being yourself. If you can walk away and say, I honestly express myself today fully in the moment, that's success. And it doesn't matter what the universe is saying. I won't mention names, but you have people like writers who say, okay, so if you play basketball or you play hockey and you don't win a Stanley Cup or NBA championship, you're not as great as somebody else. And that's letting somebody tell you who you are. That's letting somebody set in the stand like this is who you are. Nah, you don't tell me who I am. I get to choose how I see myself. And so if I don't win something, it wasn't meant to be. Maybe it wasn't in God's plan. But if I can honestly say I gave everything, I left everything on the court or on the ice, I'm the best version of myself, then that's success. So we can't let people tell you who you are. And they will. They want to tell you who you are, what you should do, what you should be. That's your job. And your job is to be you. The purpose of a lifetime is to be yourself. Carl Jung. Is to be yourself, your real self, your authentic self. Authenticity is more important than winning. That's what I'm saying. And people say, well, you win, it makes you feel a certain way. Okay, but that shit don't last.
Yeah.
Then you gotta do it again. You gotta do it again. You understand what I'm saying? There's no, because when you're feeding the ego, you talked about it, it's this, you're looking for justification or validation out here instead of giving it to yourself. and letting your
Yeah.
virtue, letting your character, the content of your character, express who you are, and you can feel it. They call it charisma. They call it a sense of presence. When you can be yourself, and when you can just don't let the world tell you who you are. That's your job.